You're listening to Up West Sports. My name's Gavin Hite. I'm here with my colleague and longtime best friend, Kyle Knowles. We're going to be talking some baseball stuff today.
Baseball stuff! Baseball stuff!
Lock in. Kyle, we got some deferment to talk about. We got some prospective free agents to talk about. We got some, we have a roster to take a look at that. If we have no more acquisitions, what are we going to do? So we're going to break all that down, but we're going to start off with deferment. Kyle, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. So you bring up deferment and you go, first thing at least I found was 1950s, and you go, okay, that's. I mean, you think this is such a hot topic today? 75 years ago, it's happened, and of course, it's Ted Williams. Unfortunately, they don't, you can't find, they don't have the contract information, this or that, but they're saying, yeah, Ted Williams had a deferment in a contract. So it kind of perks your interest. So, it kind of is a dead end, which is like, dang, you want to find more about Ted. So then you keep digging in, you go into a, Catfish Hunter, 1974, gets 50 cash and about 50K, and I think it was insurance annuities. It can't get paid out, goes into arbitration, and he becomes a free agent. And that's a big deal because not 2 years later, free agency became a big thing, became something in Major League Baseball, which deferments now and free agency. I mean, now we're seeing it being, it's a married couple, and it's potentially changing the landscape of baseball. And just to kind of just bring everyone in, what is deferment, right? Essentially, it's taking money in a contract that you signed and pushing it down the road. So in this case, we talk about Ohtani, 10 years, $70 million, $700 million, mind you. And it's $2 million.
No chump change.
No chump
change.
But of that deal, he is taking 97% of that, or the Dodgers are, not him, 97% of that. And that's going to be deferred starting in 2034 and ending in 2043. So, and not only was that one contract, was it another 3 more? I mean, it's insane.
So what, for a team like the Dodgers that are just at the top of the deferral game right now, what's the benefit to them to be able to kind of do that?
So one, I think they have the money, but they go, well, we can invest that now. It's going to gain in, you put into a money market, some sort of, fund, it's going to gain interest. And so by the time you start paying that out, you potentially are only going to be paying them the gains on your money. I mean, it's a really, in terms of financial, it's a good move. But again, you have to be a team that can do that. And then for a player, it's a big benefit when you have the opportunities of, hey, I don't know what my career is. I don't know what I have a career after the game or what that's going to look like. Also, I don't know if my next career is going to make the same money as what I do today. And if I have a lifestyle that banks on the money I make, having that in the back pocket moving forward kind of gives you a little bit of wiggle room moving forward. Also, if you're a market that can get advertising, Ohtani, he's got New Balance. He's got a couple more.
Yeah.
He's supplementing what he's not getting on this contract with those items, with those different, those revenue streams. So for someone 100%. Like that, it's a no-brainer. So you're making money now and you're making money, potentially after you're done playing, and a large sum of it. Really, at that point, you're putting your feet up and saying, "Cool, just let me know when the check clears."
And to kind of like bounce off of that, I guess something that we talked about, the teams that can afford to do that, right? Like the Mariners, obviously, budget's constrained, and we've heard nothing but John Stanton and company just talking about how much money they don't have. What's to stop them from putting that money aside so it can grow on interest and only do like $5 million, right? Like, let's say you go out and you get a free agent, last year or even this year, and you put $5 million and you're supposed to be paying them $10 million, but they deferred. So it's $5 million. So in a couple of years, when as the interest grows, maybe you get that money back. Is the interest rate good? Those are questions that I don't know. And I'm just curious why a team like the Mariners couldn't capitalize on that and couldn't move forward in that direction. I don't know. I just, it's one of those things where it's a head scratcher for a team that's trying to save money now, who expects to have money in the future, or maybe they don't. I don't know. Their revenue, when you see it at the end of the year, fans show up to games. The money's coming in. They're winning everywhere. People buy the hot dogs that are floating from the sky. People are, well, I guess they don't buy them, but they're floating from the sky. They're spending money on what seems to be ridiculous stuff when it could be spent in something like this. Like, this is an investment. This is an investment that you're not paying $15 million to a player. You're paying the deferment of that, and then hopefully paying them back within the next couple of years after that. Would that make sense for a team like the Mariners to be able to do maybe half of what they're supposed to pay them, and then have that money accrue interest and be able to pay them down the road?
I mean, we look at what the Dodgers are doing today, and you look at what they've brought in. I mean, you put it on borderline monopoly. I mean, they're monopolizing on the top talent, and they're doing it in a way that Major League Baseball allows you to do. And not just Major League Baseball. I mean, this is a tactic. This is a loophole. This is something that is used in the three major sports. So baseball is not the unique, the unique outlier in this situation. But I think for the Mariners, I mean, it makes you think about a couple things. And I know we've talked about it in nauseum. Like, well, what could it be? I mean, is Stanton at a point of, I don't want to risk $1 down the road? Like, I want my money now. And I mean, if you look at it, was it 2 years ago? I'm not sure what the numbers were last year, but I think in 2023, they were the Mariners were number one in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So you're making your money. Like, money's coming in, like you said. It's just,
yeah.
Right now we have a management group that does not want to spend it. And I think it just kind of goes to, we can't really complain. I mean, they're the owner. It is what it is. They're not selling. They're making a ton of money. Why would they not? But as a fan, it's kind of that, well, if you're not going to spend money at this point in terms of, paying, one of these people, $28 million, why not do this deal? Like,
yeah,
what's,
that's 100%. My question to them is, this is the new Moneyball. Understandably, deferrals have been around for forever, but it's now surfacing because there's an actual advantage to it. And as we just kind of talk through that and everything, we were touching a little bit on other sports there, and I wanted to get into the deferment regulations and just comparative to other sports that we've talked about, in the past. I wanted to surface that in this podcast with everything. When we're trying to regulate deferment, what does that look like?
So if we look at the three major sports, right? So clearly we know that the Major League Baseball is the Wild Wild West. There's no regulation on it. It is do as you please. You look at the NFL, I hadn't had a chance to look at duration or years, but in terms of amount that you can defer, it's up to 50%. So that Mahomes deal, if they wanted to defer that, I think it was $400 million at the time. They could only defer 200. They can only defer 200 million. God, 200 million seems chunk change compared to some of these deals that we're seeing today. And then in the NBA, it's 25%, up to 25%. But here's the thing that is just kind of, now here's the added layer. Both those sports have a salary cap. Baseball does not.
Right.
So not only are they capping what you can defer, they cap what you can spend as a total team. To me, that is looking at a league and saying, I want competitive balance. I can't control every team, but I can at least control these teams that, they can control the LA Dodgers of basketball. They can stop them from just going way over the top. And we've even seen, at least in basketball, the most prominent one, seeing a David Stern veto a trade because he felt that based on essentially the power dynamic of it, it was going to create a very lopsided balance. At least that's how I see it. And there might have been different reasons, but that's how I saw it. In baseball, I mean, barring the Alex Rodriguez potential trade to the Red Sox, where he wanted to restructure his deal, and there was a huge idea of, well, is that going to cause precedent? Is that going to cause a dynamic shift? We're not seeing anything that's stopping, that's saying, hey, time out. This seems to be a really, I get deferment. I mean, we look, Ken Griffey Jr., Seattle Mariner, he had a deferment with the Reds. I believe he's still getting paid, and I think he's going to get paid for quite a few more years. But no one's stopping the Dodgers. I mean, and I guess from a commissioner standpoint or that high level standpoint, if it's making the league money and it's making the owner money and it's making the team's money, why stop it? Which, I guess there's merit to that, but at the same time, from the fan, I mean, is Dodger? I mean, am I going to see the Dodgers on Root Sports eventually just because they're so big and powerful? I don't know, but it's just,
And first things first, as a Mariners fan, I am not mad at the Dodgers for doing this. No. You don't have a salary cap, and you don't have a cap on your deferral. There's no real regulations that are holding $1.2 billion in deferrals. That's a lot of money. You could buy a team with that. Kyle and I were talking right before the show. You can buy a team with $1.2 billion. Maybe the Rays. A couple years ago, I think if I'm remembering correctly, I think the Miami Marlins got sold for somewhere in that $1 to $2 billion range. You can pretty much buy a team with how much money is being deferred, and then on top of that, their salary is north of 370.
So $1.5 billion just on players. It's
just on players. So
we can't be mad. We can't be mad as fans. We can be envious because
to get back to that point, I'm not mad at the Dodgers. I'm frustrated that the other teams haven't stepped up, and there's some other teams that are stepping up. I'm talking mainly Mariners, that you haven't stepped up and shown that you want to be here. Anything else on the regulations? Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm just saying, especially when you look at potentially one of the best. Well, I'm sorry, it is the best pitching staff I think the Mariners have ever seen. I mean, you look at the 01 Mariners. I mean, everyone on that staff had a career year, but in terms of just talent, this is by far the best 5-man rotation this Mariners team has ever seen. And if you look at rotations probably in the last decade, I think you would have arguments to say, again, there's probably in terms of just totality stats better, but of sheer ceilings, it's probably in the last 10 years, it's a top 3 rotation.
This is 1 through 5. I was actually digesting this the other day because they were comparing. I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter saying, "Oh, who has the better staff? Is it the Seattle Mariners or is it the Dodgers now?" And obviously, it's the Dodgers pending health. What's crazy to me, and I'll knock on wood, but I do have to address it because we're finally past the season. They didn't have a guy that was out for more than I think 3 or 4 weeks, which is incredible. You don't get that, which is also why the window of opportunity is dwindling. It's dwindling with every month. It's dwindling, especially in every year. So the fact that you had, for the most part, a fairly healthy rotation for last year, and as good as they were, you always expect somebody to be out for a couple months, at least one of those guys to be out for a couple of months. So that's the other thing coming into this next season is, do you need a sixth pitcher to kind of mitigate some stuff? I like Emerson Hancock. I like some of those other guys, but I mean, that's a huge part of it is we're expecting all 5 guys to be healthy, and we don't have necessarily a deep backup option. There's, like I mentioned, Emerson Hancock's one. Brandon Garcia is still coming up through the grapevine. I like him. I think he can actually produce this year. I think given his age and given his production in high A and double A, I think he can be a great addition this year. But I mean, the window of opportunity, it's closing fast. And if you don't make moves, you're going to see it go by. And you're gonna absolutely waste one of the best rotations of the 21st century. Like it's arguable, but
I think another person to think about is Jonathan Diaz. I think I'm gonna butcher that name, and I apologize. He was kind of that guy. He was kind of our Tommy Malone. He was our spot guy. We'd throw in there, and he did great. But you have Emerson Hancock, and then you got obviously the guys coming up, and you have Brian Wu. That was a guy that kind of got hurt a little bit, missed a few starts, which again, like you said, is expected. I mean, you think about these unicorn years where these Mariners or anyone pitching staffs don't get hurt, far and few between. I think in 2001, amazing year. I don't think anyone in that in that pitching staff got hurt, and it does not happen. And so the fact that we have, I think Brian Wu for the most part was the only one that really had any significant time that was missed. That's still massive when you got 4 or 5 starters that are missing. What he missed, probably 4 or 5 starts. We have to pull the numbers up, but we had people in place. So would a 6-man rotation actually help that? Help relieve, just take some innings off people. I mean, like beyond this point, the 300-game winner seems like it'll never happen again. So at this point, let's just take care of the people we have today and see, because if we can get those 5 guys and you get Emerson Hancock every 6th day, I mean, you can see what they did last year. Now it comes down to, okay, can we hit? Can we be consistent hitters? And, there's a huge ceiling. I mean, there's a huge ceiling even for them.
Well, you mentioned a name that I was a big fan of last year, Jonathan Diaz. I really liked him outside of through spring training. I thought he put up great numbers, and the ball flies down here. Even in March, the ball flies here in Arizona, and I thought he did a great job. And I thought he would be a good potential 6-man. And evidence has shown in the past that at the major league level, he can be productive. And he was good when he stepped in, and then wheels kind of fell off here and there. I still like him, but it's also like that's the one guy. There was another guy, and I was calling it last year. I had to look up his name. Outside of spring training, I was really rooting for Tyson Miller. He's kind of that sidearm submarine guy that we ended up just letting go. I think he only had like 3 or 4 innings, but he was blowing everybody away in spring training, put up great numbers. Well, Tyson Miller ended up getting picked up by the Cubs. And let's see, what were some of his numbers right here? Because I know when he left, he actually did a fine job leaving. Let's see. He had, my apologies. He had 11.2 innings with the Mariners. Hovered right around a 3.09 ERA, put up 12 strikeouts, only had 1 walk. Like, come on, Jerry, those are your numbers. What are we doing? And one of our problems at the end of the year was the bullpen. Well, get this. He goes to the NL. He goes to Chicago. He puts up 50 innings for them, has a 2.15 ERA, and puts up 42 strikeouts, 10 walks. Has an amazing year. Like, why did we let him go when bullpen ended up being one of the problems? And we had to rely on Ryan Stanek at the beginning of the year before we let him go halfway through. Frustrations. But anyways, I digress. I wanted to make it a point that I was a big fan of Tyson Miller and a big fan of Jonathan Diaz. And I think they could add a flavor. I don't know if Jonathan Diaz is making a return this year. I don't quite see him on the depth. Let me see if he's in AAA still.
I don't think he was on the 26 at least.
Yeah, I don't think he's there. I don't see him as a reliever. Let's see if he's got him listed as a starter. Oh no, he's still there. Okay, good. So we still got him, Emerson Hancock, and then they just called up towards the end of last year, Blas Castano, who he could be another one.
He's another if healthy.
So yeah, he's another if healthy. He's another And
that's our bullpen right now.
Yeah.
I mean, minus your kind of your main, your headliners. I think that was the biggest thing was, Matt Brash is a prime example. I think we had a really, really nice idea of our bullpen, but it was thin as ice. Once one of them broke, kind of all fell apart. And the fact that Munoz and team held it on is, man, great on you. Like, thank you. Like,
Yeah.
But
yeah, I did not expect Munoz to have the year that he had coming off of the previous 2 years. Granted, he's still young. There was always that room for growth, but now it was kind of sink or swim this past year. It's like, hey, we're going to be without the guy we just traded for. Why am I blanking on his name? Matt Brash, and then
was it like
Gregory
Garcia?
Santos? Gregory Santos. No, it's Gregory Santos. I was blanking on his name there for a second. We're going to be without two of those guys, so the closer role is all you. We're going to bring in Stanek to kind of help you out, and I think Stanek even had a couple save opportunities in there, but he blew those up right away.
I think he took
Munoz.
was hurt. Munoz was hurt, I think, for early. I think he got hurt for early in the year. And it's like, okay, Stanek, do what you do, and he.
And it was, and then you had Colin Snyder, who had kind of a terrible spring training, and then just absolutely dominate the year. Was completely surprised by Colin Snyder. That one was a wake up. Taylor Saucedo, wasn't the best year, but I like the guy, and he's a local guy. I think I even played against him. He does, and he has some nasty pitches from the left side. I think I even played him in high school. I think he played for Taylor when I played for Chafee, which is pretty cool. And I saw he was actually on another podcast, Raise the Trident with Jake. Dude's awesome. For the flavor itself, I want Sauce to stay, but he's got some nasty stuff, and I'm excited to see him this year. But yeah, kind of switching gears and moving into our prospective free agents. There's two big names that Mariners Twitter and Mariners fans everywhere are talking about, and kind of slightly, for the most part, from what I've seen on Twitter, from just from my eyes, there's one that sticks out more than the other, just from talk around the town. But yeah, I mean, we got them both here. I know we have the stats from both. One of them only has, I believe, 3 at-bats, 3 games in Seattle. He's 0 for 11.
Yeah.
Is that 0 for 11, 3 games. He's only had those 3 games. And that's Big Bad Polar Bear, but I'm still a fan of him, and I still think he's going to hit in Seattle, especially around Cal Raleigh, and especially around Randy Rosarena, Julio Rodriguez, Victor Robles. I think with the guys that circulate around, and Luke Raley, I can't forget him. Guys that circulate around him, I think he thrives, and I think the team thrives with him. The one that fits better, just because A, we know he hits in Seattle, but B, if his name wasn't Alex Bregman, he would be stat-wise like a perfect fit. Kyle, I know you got the numbers. How good is he?
So from what I found with Bregman, so again, playing in our division, you get a good sample size of him, especially, and beyond that, a good sample size at home. So looking at the stats, 53 games, 205, at bats, spanning 220 or 226 plate appearances. We're looking at not a big home run hitter. And again, this is not a big home run park unless your name's Nelson Cruz. 5 home runs. We got 17 ribbies. We're looking at a 259 average, 327 with a 400 slugging, playing third base. I mean, if you took his name away, you could also say who did this in 53 games in Seattle. You could say Kyle Seager.
Yeah,
and I think the frames, everything kind of fits that mold. And quite frankly, you're looking at, walk to strikeout ratio, 19-31 over those 53 games. That's pretty solid. And I think you're looking at a team that seems to strike out very, very, consistently. Having that nice little blend I mean, that's to me, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And as much as I think Pete, again, you look at Nelson Cruz, who I mentioned earlier. Okay, looking at his game, he had 3 games, 11 at bats, no hits. Okay, that's fine. He's a power hitter, didn't hit in his few games there. Nelson Cruz wasn't exactly, some masher against us when he came here. I think I can't remember how many games. I think it was a pretty good subset. He was only a 244 hitter. I think he had maybe 10, 12 home runs. Wasn't massive, especially I think for the size of games that he played here. But then clearly we saw what he did when he got here. And I'd have to go back and look at what he did in Seattle versus, on the road. But for the few games that I went to, I got to see a fireworks show by him. So, you can't read into the stats all the way. They're nice to look at. I like looking at them because at least it creates the conversation, but it does give you something to look at. But again, Pete's sample size is so small. I'm pretty sure, didn't he win the home run derby in Seattle though? A few years back, I thought he won it. Or if he didn't, he competed and hit a ton of bombs. So, and I get that they're throwing BP fastballs, but again, his bat could translate here very favorably. That power right-handed, bat that we really haven't had since Nelson, it might work out.
It might.
It just comes down to the money.
It does. And that's another topic I kind of wanted to. It wasn't on our list of topics to talk about, but I did want to bring it up real quick. What does it look like to get one of these guys in here? Either Pete Alonso or Alex Bregman. I'll throw a distant third in there. It's been circulating in some circles around the Mariners talks, but Nolan Arenado, who's not a free agent but could be traded for. There's a lot of deferred money there. It's a weird situation where, Kyle and I were talking. I feel like if there's deferred money involved, the team that made the deferred money should probably eat that, or it's under the understanding that that's probably what you're going to do. Now, if they don't want to eat all that deferred money and they want to talk, how much are we going to give to the other team to be able to pay Arenado? Well, now you're just going to lessen the prospect that you get back. So I feel like St. Louis, if they want a good prospect like Harry Ford or somebody on the top 100, which I think you would have to do to package Mitch Haniger. I think you got to you got to package a top 100 prospect with Mitch Haniger to be able to kind of counterbalance it, which, he's going to be, I think with everything included, somewhere in the neighborhood of 17 and a half.
I think it's about 17 and a half.
About 17 and a half. And
I think
next year, 17 and a half. I think it's at 15 and a half, but it's not counting his prorated
I think it was a player.
bonus.
It was a player option, right?
Was it? Well, it's 15.5 if I'm not mistaken, and that is the set amount that he's given for the year, but it's not prorating in the bonus at the beginning of the year. I think the bonus is actually split out through his contract. So I think they're paying $2 million off of the bonus, which puts it up at 17 and a half. So operating at that level where we're expecting the most at 17 and a half, the difference would be 16, what you're paying Arenado. Maybe you just cut the difference and say, hey, we'll cover the difference to make it 17 and 17 and a half, and boom, there you go. But getting back to the free agents with Pete Alonso, that's kind of where you have to start with Mitch Haniger. Because right now, Mitch Haniger, according to Fangraphs, they got him slated in as a starter, but I don't know if he plays most of the year as a starter. I think he's going to be kind of the odd man out and just off the bench type of guy. And if you can get rid of 17.5 million, especially if he's going to put up similar numbers as last year, even though his numbers at Safeco were Safeco, it's always going to be Safeco to me, even though his numbers at T-Mobile were actually respectable. It's 17.5 million that you can shuffle away. And I've addressed this on a couple different segments before, but looking at the trade last year where the Mariners traded away Jerry Kelenic and they traded away Marco Gonzalez, who was going through Tommy John, and Evan White, who was like always injured. They traded all that away and got a injured prospect in return, and then Jackson Kovar. And then I think about a week or two later, the Braves turned right back around and they dealt those guys elsewhere. I think they ate $5 million of Marco Gonzalez. So I think the Mariners had to pay $5 million. The Braves had to pay $5 million, and they traded him to the Pirates. So the Pirates had to pay $5 million. That was a win. And then Evan White's contract, I think most of that went away. So they ended up getting, Jerry Kelenic, and not real, and $5 million, $6 million if they counted just some from Evan White. So I think they can be done, especially with a defective player like Marco Gonzalez. And I'm not trying to downplay Marco Gonzalez. He was one of my favorite Mariners for quite some time. But a guy that's going through Tommy John, you don't know how he's going to return. And somebody's going to pay for that. There's got to be a market for it here. There's got to be somebody that's willing to take on Mitch Haniger and maybe half of his money, and maybe even a little bit more. Just depends on that prospect. But I think if you want all 15 to 17 million gone, it's going to be that top 100. But you do that to bring in a Pete Alonso, to bring in an Alex Bregman. You upgrade your roster. You already have a great a great farm system to be able to replenish. You got the number 3 pick coming up. I wouldn't be too worried about losing a top 100 pick unless his name was Cole Emerson. I'd stay away from trying to trade that guy. All the guys on there I really like, but I'd stay away from him. But I mean, do you see any other way of getting this done? Of maybe acquiring these guys, maybe freeing up some money?
Well, I mean, you kind of mentioned the prospects, top 100. I mean, I guess the way I look at it is from the top 20 perspective, I think 30% of your top 20 are shortstops. They all can't. So that's equating to six players roughly.
Yeah.
They all can't play shortstop. They all can't play second base. At one point, they're prospects, right? We don't know how they're going to turn out. But we know what, obviously, do you have a couple that are near ready to go? Can you shift them to second base, third base? Okay, what are these people? What are these other players, right? That you're going, okay, they're kind of a fringe second base, shortstop, but we have some that are more, hey, legitimate shortstop, legitimate second baseman. Let's package these people up and let's send them off. Like you said, package them up with a contract that really is hindering us based on our constraints, self-imposed, and we make a deal that helps us today. Again, we mentioned how good our pitching staff is. And, there was a talk today I saw about, kind of Detroit Lions. Did their window close? Is their window closing? The answer is probably yes. Well, then you have to ask your same question. And the reason why that is you start seeing, okay, you got people coming up for contracts. Again, they're in a salary cap, right? We and ourselves as Mariners we have our own self-imposed salary cap. And you've got some pitchers coming due here fairly soon. And so it's like, let's win now. And, and again, if you were able to package these deals, send it off, and get someone that can help you win today, I mean, we can't sit there and go the what if. We can't have the buyer's remorse. I think that's the biggest thing that stops us from making some of these trades like that these teams like San Diego does, where it's like, hey, we have prospects. I mean, they weren't trading Jackson Merrill for anything, but they knew that. They knew that probably in multiple times. We're not getting rid of him. And so with that, it's Mariners. I mean, prospects are great. You've rebuilt our system. Kudos to you. Thank you so much. But we have to be able to use that as capital if you're not going to use money as capital. And I feel like if we can't do that, we're going to kind of sit here and you and I are going to sit there and banter and spin our heads trying to figure out how we make these deals work. And we're going to talk to everybody else the same thing. If they're not going to spend it, you got to trade it. And if you're not going to trade your capital, then I don't know what you're looking for. Divine intervention.
These guys keep us in business. That's for sure. I did want to give a shout out really quick. The Mitch Haniger trade where you're packaging in a top 100 prospect. I did actually get that from Joe Doyle and the Marine Layer guys. I saw that on Twitter. So shout out to them for that, because I agree. I think that's exactly what that's going to take. I think it's going to take a top 100 prospect at this point, because you didn't do it earlier, because, I don't know, misread the market, whatever you want to call it. They say that a lot. I misread the market. Well, you misread going to the playoffs.
Oh no! We suck again!
54% of the
which
time.
is 54% of the time we try our hardest. The others, yeah. So, yeah, it's crazy that you have this pitching staff and you just don't want any home playoff games, which, if we're talking about revenue, if we're talking about money, which is, I guess, the only language that these guys speak, you saw how much money, and just like, unlike football, you get 7 games a series, which means you're either getting 3 or 4 home games, besides the wild card, where it's 3 games, and then the divisional, which is 5 games. Once you get into the heart of it, which is where you should be aiming for, the CS or World Series, those are 7 games. You're getting 3 or 4 home games. And we all saw the game a couple years ago. It was our first home playoff game since 2001, and it was electric. It went, 17 innings? Electric. I was glued. Granted, I live down here in Arizona. I was glued to the TV from sun up to sundown, because that game started towards the middle of the day and then didn't end until it was pitch black out. And it was awesome. And I don't think anybody left their seat, because that was electric. Why don't you want that? Especially since you're hiking the prices of everything. No one's leaving their seat. You got a good team. Man, you have so much room to capitalize on this to get to there. And that's where you really make good money, in my opinion. And if you go, you take a look at when the Seahawks won when they won in 2013, 2014, fans were being sprouted up in North Carolina. They were, that's what's going to happen if you win the World Series. When the Nationals won the World Series, I had some friends in California and Washington that had no business being Nats fans, but they were Nats fans because they won. So you're going to get that money too. I just don't. I don't know. Anyways, we'll move on to the current roster right now, as we see it, with no more moves. Let's say Bregman and Alonso, and no trades. And this is what you got, because at this point, it kind of just seems like that is what's happening. Victor Robles leading off. This is per Fangraphs, by the way. Victor Robles is leading off. Julio Rodriguez at the 2-hole, playing center field. Robles out and right. Cal Raleigh batting third, playing catcher. I don't know if I would put him third. I would probably put, depending on who's pitching, I potentially would put Luke Raley or Julio at the 3 spot, and then Randy Arozarena as another guy at the 3, and then Cal Raleigh at 4 or 5, just depending on the week and all that stuff. But yeah, through the heart, you got Cal Raleigh at catcher, Randy Arozarena in left, Luke Raley at first, which I agree with, and I know my co-host over here, Kyle Knowles, definitely agrees with. Mitch Haniger set for DH right now. I maybe he gets the game 1 nod, just kind of an ode to thank you for being a Mariner. He did hit a home run last year in game 1, so maybe we run it back with that and just kind of see where we're at with that. But longevity wise, I don't think he's going to be in your starting lineup very often. I think he's going to be more of the off the bench guy. You got JP Crawford at shortstop. They have Donovan Solano slated at third and Dylan Moore at second. I think Dylan Moore gets the nod at second, just because coming off a Gold Glove year, I think he's earned it. I think you give him the start, let him lose the job if you, I guess, if that's the way you're going to look at it. But Dylan Moore, I think, has earned the right to play second base. barring any trades. But again, we're looking at this with no trades. Donovan Solano at third. I don't know if he sticks at third, considering his age, considering his shift over to kind of the other side of the infield. I think he may be at first or DH. Kyle, what are your thoughts?
So I decided to take a different approach to it, and I kind of looked at each of these players and said, okay, let's look at the splits and let's look at where you did best, and then try to create a lineup based on that. And quite frankly, from Fangraphs to this, it's not that much different. I've got Victor Robles leading off right field. Last year in 28 games, 100 at bats, 370 average, 436 OPB, and a 500 slugging. I'll take that any day. Julio, obviously, is your center fielder. His stats over 131 games, 279, 330, 421 slugging. I have Cal Raleigh sitting in the 3-hole. Again, I kind of took it as I want my best hitter getting the most amount of at bats with people on. And if I know, and so I just think, okay, that 3-hole, I'm not putting him in the 2-hole, 3-hole. Again, 135 games, which for a catcher, that's pretty much what we're getting. I don't think you're going to get more than 135 games. He's going to be a 215, 308, 420. And then Randy in the 4-hole, 140 games in right field, 223 average, 336 OPB, 396 slugging. It's a solid. Now, this is where some things could change, right? Where maybe Luke Raley comes in the cleanup. And why I say that is looking really at what he did at the position that he did best in. And Luke Raley at first base last year was in 41 games, 111 at bats, 260 average, but with a 362 on base and a 622 slugging. 622. My numbers might be off, but I think from what I was looking at, looks pretty spot on. That might be your 4-hole. And pretty happy with that, if that's what we're going to get. And then you got Donovan Solano. Everyone's slating him. Oh, is he a second baseman, third baseman? Looking at some of his numbers, again, in 29 games, I know it's not a ton, but he only played 96 last year. So that's almost 33% of his games last year. So the DH, 354, 404, and 500. Okay, can you come close to that? Anywhere near that over, I think the most games he played in his career so far was like 137. So those are some numbers. Those are numbers that we can use.
Those are numbers.
And as a DH, I'll take it. Dylan Moore, again, again, he's your super utility guy. And, as a Gold Glover, I think you got to give him due, especially you didn't bring anybody else in, right, to take that spot. So I think he's earned that right to start. So as a second baseman, 37 games, 218, 354. And what shocked me was a 410 slugging. I didn't think he hit that high in terms of power. I thought he was, but if you think about it, he was always one that kind of when the game just kind of seemed out of reach, he hit a bomb or hit a gapper.
He had some clutch hits for sure.
It was
random.
Hits.
Yeah, he had some random. And over the last couple of years, I remember there's been a couple times where I didn't expect him to come through late in the game. Houston, I think there was I'm remembering this one. I think it was the year we went to the playoffs, and I think we were playing the Padres because I was watching the game with my buddy who's from San Diego, big Padres fan, and I want to say it was like late in the game, and they were losing like 2-1, 3-2, something along those lines, and Dylan Moore hits a bomb and takes the lead. Mariners win. It was crazy, but he's been clutch, and I agree. I think he does have his due. I think it's his job. It's his job to lose unless some miracle trade comes through,
or someone young comes in.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Luke Raley is he could be potentially the everyday first baseman. He has a chance to be the everyday first baseman and bat 4 in the lineup. He did a lot better than a lot of people give him credit for last year. I think he really flew under the radar, but for me, it was kind of a breakout year. But I guess that kind of bleeds us into breakout players for the year. I know you had a hot topic here with him. Go ahead and tell me what your thoughts are.
So if we're looking at, like breakout players, I kind of got stuck between two. I got stuck between Luke Raley and Donovan Solano. So Donovan Solano, he's probably 12. I think he's a 12-year vet, 37. But if you look at his numbers, he's I don't know if he's been just a platoon player, but if you look at his best year, this was, I think it was 2 years ago. I think he was with Minnesota. I mean, 134 games, 450 plate appearances, 282 average, 369 on base with a 391 slugging. I mean, so that shows he can play a full year and be productive. He doesn't have any of these dips that some people you see, a small sample size and go, oh, he's great. And then you go, I think the sample size wasn't big enough. We've seen what he can do in a full year in Minnesota, which I would say they've got their cold months too, just like we do in Seattle.
Yeah.
There might be some translation there. And then
Luke
Raley, excuse me. So you got Luke Raley. I think he was one of our best hitters last year. I think statistically speaking, but just consistent. And we look at his numbers as a first baseman, again, 41 games. I didn't look back to see, how many in total he played. But if you can come close to 261, 362 on base, and a 622 slugging, which equates to 100 home run or 1100, 11 home, yes. 11 home runs and 111 at bats. So he's hitting 10% of his 10% of his hits are home runs. I think that's a pretty good clip. And then he's getting, his walk to strikeout ratio is 12 to 36. 1 to 3. I mean, that's not exactly what we'd want. So if he can get those strikeouts down, I think he's got a chance to be. I think he's going to be something special.
Yeah, and if history serves me correctly, and the guys over at Locked On talked about this last year, towards the beginning of the year, because Luke Raley was not playing at all. They I don't know why, but between him and Sebi Zavala, they were just stashing him on the bench for almost no reason. It didn't make any sense to me why they didn't put him in the lineup, why they weren't giving them opportunities.
Luke Raley last year for the Mariners.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to you got to give France his due.
True.
I think they gave it was his job to lose, and I think he clearly lost it. He's no longer here. But
what surprises me is the versatility with Luke Raley being able to play the outfield. You can put him at DH. You can play first base. He was getting nothing. And so I was very surprised by that. I was also a little disappointed because I was like, okay, you see the numbers from the years before. You see his numbers from the, from the minor leagues and everything. History shows that he can handle left-handed pitching just fine. Now, granted, this last year, he didn't do very well. I want to say he had sub 100 plate appearances. Could be, somewhere right around then. So I still want to see him given that opportunity. I still want to see him be given that chance against left-handers and prove people wrong. I think Luke Raley was one of the best hitters on the team last year. Obviously, Cal Raleigh was up there. Obviously, Julio Rodriguez had a down year and was still up there. And then you trade for Randy Arozarena, and then you trade for Justin Turner, and the lineup's starting to look a little better. I still think Luke Raley was towards the top. He was in that upper echelon of players. It's not surprising to me if he becomes your everyday first baseman and he happens to work his way into an all-star game. Kyle, you hit it on the head. I think he could be an absolute breakout player this year. And then Donovan Solano, his is just how many games can he give us? Because if you can give us 120 games, we've seen over the years, doesn't matter where you are, you're a 280 hitter like everywhere. And it doesn't matter how many games. It's just like 280 is what you're going to give us, which is awesome. The other part is, my breakout player for this year, not too many people know this about him, but, at Auburn University, he was an all-conference shortstop. Ryan Bliss has a chance to play anywhere on the field. Name a position. You could probably put catcher's gear on that guy, and he'll still do well.
And
I think Ryan Bliss by the end of this year is an everyday starter. Whether it's Mark McLemore style, where they're, and Dylan Moore style, where he's playing left field one day, second base the next day, and third base the next, or he gets shifted to third, and there's some other shifts in the infield, and Ryan Bliss just takes off. But Ryan Bliss, given his college pedigree at shortstop, I wouldn't be against having him play a couple games at shortstop and then just keeping Dylan Moore at second base. And that's nothing against JP Crawford, but we do have to have another shortstop, because last year it was we had to scratch and claw and find whoever we could. We had Leo Rivas that was coming up. We had Dylan Moore that was over there, who actually did pretty well, but that's not what you think of him as. You don't think of him as a shortstop. So yeah, Ryan Bliss is my hot take. I think he's going to break out, and I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be great. He's at least going to steal a ton of bags. I think his hit tool is a little lower. I think, on his down years, he'll be a 200 to a 210 hitter, but on his better years, I think he could give you close to that 250 plus. And then everything else, I think he does have some power. I think he could hit 15 to 20 home runs. I'm very excited about this guy. Yeah, kind of wrapping up the. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say, no, to your point, you think about a 200, 210 hitter with some power. I mean, you're looking at JP Crawford with some stolen bags. And quite frankly, we need them. I mean, looking at the lineup that I threw together based on what we were at, I'd be curious to know what Fangraphs had for the stats of their last year's stats. I mean, I'm looking at mine, 3 stolen bases. That's what I saw. Now, again, that's based on what the positions they were playing when they stole the base, but 3 stolen bases.
Yeah.
You're not going to win many games with 3 stolen bases in a season. You know what I mean? Like, and again, some of these are extrapolated out. We need movement, especially if we're a team that's not going to hit a lot of home runs. We need to move the ball. We need to not move the ball. We need to move people around the bases and score them. And that fits the JP mold. And and if you can move, and if JP's hitting hot, cool, move him. You can move him to DH. Especially if you're facing those righties or lefties. And I think Bliss. I agree. I think Bliss could do a lot. So I mean, you think about who do we have just this last year? We ended up trading him to the Rays. I think it was part of the Rayleigh trade. He was kind of that. Yeah. He just kind of pissed people off.
Caballero,
yeah. Like you
he was
need a guy that.
Yeah, Caballero.
That as you as a pitcher, myself as a pitcher, having people on the base path that you got to keep an eye on, it does change your idea when you're facing another hitter. You're going, I got to think about this guy and pitch the ball. What pitch do I think they're running on? Okay, I got what's my best pitch? I'm a guy that threw backwards, so I'm going great. I got to try to figure out when to not throw a slider. When 70% of the time I am throwing a slider, and they probably know that, and it's a game of cat and mouse, and that all that thinking that goes into it causes chaos, and it causes chaos on the base paths, and it causes chaos by the pitcher making a mistake. And we need that.
One extra thought,
especially with our lineup.
One extra thought from a pitcher is too much. If that hitter or that base runner is in your head,
game over.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's definitely a lost art from the game. Guys like Caballero that are just super pesky like that. Jose Altuve is really good at it. Guys that are pesky like that, that's a lost art. I'm hoping that there's still going to be some of those guys out there, but what gets you drafted, right? Bombs. Mm-hmm. Bombs get you drafted, unless you're batting over 500. But yeah, I mean, Kyle, we covered a lot tonight. We covered deferment regulations. We covered, Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso potentially with also Arenado in discussion for a potential move to Seattle. We covered the current roster where it stands with no moves. And some breakout players. I wanted to kind of kick it over to you. Do you have any final thoughts on this episode?
Like you said, we covered a lot of topics, but I think it just comes down to we want the Mariners to succeed. We want to see. You talk about obviously we were pretty young, but like we want to see 90s baseball. We want to see that. But I guess for the, think about today, I want to see that last month of baseball back 2 years ago, seeing those stands nuts, going crazy. It's the third inning. And it's like, this is an atmosphere where it didn't matter if it was the third inning or the ninth inning. People were electric. People were invested. And, sport. I mean, we've talked about some of the stuff that we've seen in college athletics. Sports makes a town. It brings a town together because it's just something you can all go sit. I mean, you can go sit down on a TV, you can go to a bar, you can go to a restaurant, you can go to someone's home. It brings people together. And when you have a team that you want so badly to succeed, but you feel like the people in charge just really just care about the ones and zeros, it's deflating. But you're still sitting there going, this is my team, and I'm going to root for them. I mean, as a Kook fan, I mean, you kind of feel that, I don't care. I bleed the colors, and it's, you just hope that you always hope that there's just something we're not seeing, and there's something happening in the background, or maybe there's something happening in the off season. Maybe they're seeing something in a player that we haven't seen yet. We talk about our breakout players. Maybe there's someone we're not even remotely thinking of that's going to come through here and just absolutely blow us away. And it's those few things you have to kind of just hope come to fruition.
We definitely couldn't get through all that without a Go Cougs. Go Cougs. Final thoughts from me. Where deferment stands and all that. The Mariners can take advantage, and they're not. The Mariners are just shooting themselves in the foot, and I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And that's the other part that just kind of gets under my skin, is that there's no transparency. There's no rhyme or reason, and they're not going to tell you why. They're just going to do this and expect you to just like it. And the loyal fan base that we have, they keep showing up, and they're looking for 54%. For Up West Sports, my name's Gavin Hite. That's my co-host, Kyle Knowles. Just remember, life's too short. Gas up, you boys.